couple weeks ago, I sat down with Dane Brugler of The Athletic, NFL Draft Guru, and we talked about the top positions in the NFL Draft. I've done quarterback, running back already on the channel. This is the wide receivers, talking about his top 15. Tight ends will be up after this. Let me know if you guys want this series to continue, and let's go ahead and get into the top 15 receivers in the 2023 NFL Draft class. We talked about JSN. We'll break it down a little bit more in depth here with the receiver class. It is, I don't know. Deep is not the word I want to necessarily use because it's not exactly very strong, but I think it's a little bit difficult to separate some of these guys. How different in terms of just overall grade is a Jalen Hyatt from a Kayshon Boutte, and that's your number 5 to 11 receiver. Maybe you feel differently about those guys. Even Parker Washington at 12, there's a lot to like there. You know, and you had been also back to Twitter, I'm sure you're going to love this, taking a little bit of heat on Jordan Addison and Quentin Johnson, just saying from your sources that these guys probably aren't going to go as high as the general public seems to think. I can't tell you how many mock drafts I've seen over the past several months with Quentin Johnson going to the Bears. So it's been ridiculous, but here we are. We're getting a little bit closer to the draft. Things are getting a little bit more solidified, at least in terms of public perception. And we're starting to see Addison and Johnston slipping a little bit, certainly in your recent mock draft.
Yeah, and look, again, you never say never because all it takes is one team. And, if a team really likes Jordan Addison at 11, he'll be forever known as an 11th overall pick. So that's just, it is what it is. But I think just, and I don't talk to all 32 teams, but I do have a really good, just network of guys that I trust. And I think we're going to see a lot of teams opt to wait on the receiver position. And I think it's easier said than done. Maybe that changes before the draft, but I think teams feel really good about day 2 with the receivers that could be there. Guys like Josh Downs and, Zay Flowers, Cedric Tillman, you mentioned Boutte, guys like that, where you don't have to necessarily, go use a wide receiver, first round pick on a wide receiver, especially when like a guy like Quentin Johnston has so much potential, but a lot of it is potential. He's 6'4", 215, so explosive. The speed's going to be great. He's going to test outstanding. But, he's pretty raw as a route runner, more drops than you want to see. And so are you projecting him as a true X? What's the timeline for him to really live up to being a number 1 receiver? And so the answer to that will be different from team to team. In my mock draft, I had 3 receivers go. I had Addison, Johnston, and Smith and Jigba, and they all went in that 20 to 31 range in the back half of round 1. And I think that's much more realistic than having a couple guys in the top 20. So, you don't say it's impossible because, again, all it takes is one team and, need a receiver. And I think it'll also help. This is not a strong wide receiver free agency group.
It's so weak. I mean, that's maybe part of why we saw Chase Claypool get traded for a second. Although I'd like to think that if the Bears knew where that pick was going to fall, they wouldn't make that move again. But well, that's obviously a lot of conjecture. Can't say that for certain.
Would have loved to hear the conversation when I'm assuming they tried to offer the second round pick first, and to hear what the Steelers said, and maybe that's the sign of a younger GM, with Chicago and not being able, because the Bears have 2 second-round picks and not making it that second rounder and not, kind of being steadfast about it. And, it's a difference of, like 20 picks or whatever it is. So, yeah, it's I think if they could have a do-over, they probably would. But, this is a receiver class that there should be some good ones for them on day 2. And, I know people are so conditioned with how the last 2 drafts have gone that receivers are going to go early. But you look at last year, you could make an easy argument that there wouldn't be a receiver this year that would be drafted ahead of the top 5 or 6 receivers last year. Jordan Addison doesn't have a definite better grade than Jahan Dotson. So, it's not as deep of a class this year at receiver. It's not, the high end is not the same this year as it was past year. It's not to say there's not good players. There are. I think there are several NFL starters that'll come out of this draft at wide receiver, but it's just a different class than we've seen the last few years.
Yeah, it's tough when you have Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, Jamar Chase, and then you see you see those guys go as high as they did, and they've been very good players early. And who
Mhm.
knows what these guys are going to be? How dissimilar do you think Quentin Johnston is from a guy like DK Metcalf?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously DK was a little bit freakier in terms of just
Yeah.
the size. I mean, just in the power that he offered. In that offense at Ole Miss with Phil Longo, I think that the routes he was not asked to run a full route tree. It was pretty linear, and that's what he does best. Still weird that DK fell as far as he did. I mean, even if you have questions about the three cone and all that kind of stuff. Still, to fall to I think it was like pick 60. That just didn't
Yeah,
make
I
sense. That was
wonder how
weird.
much the neck injury played a role in that. I can't say for
Yeah,
certain, obviously. But yeah,
that
I'd seen
would
that thrown
make
around.
sense.
I figured I would bring it up.
Hmm.
Although I don't, I see similar tools in the toolbox. I don't really see a similar. I don't know what another analogy is, but forget about it. JSN very much not like Quentin Johnston. Number three, I feel like
Yeah.
we've been conditioned just based on production. We touched on this a little bit earlier, at least you did, about Jackson Smith and Jigba. It's really the combination of not the biggest. I mean, you have him listed at 6'1", 193. Do you think he's 6'1"?
Let me. I have I think
I
he
figure you have these
was.
from the teams.
Yeah, what I was given was 6004.
Okay.
So that would be 6 foot and a half, generously rounding up to 6'1". But yeah, there's a good chance when he weighs in, it'll be under 6'1".
So, I mean, he's very good. Production was great. You almost see someone that's like, this guy's a really good football player, not going to test all that well. And, you wonder how much that drops him down the board. Although a third round grade seems a little bit surprising to me. Although I wasn't.
Well,
Go ahead.
I say it's kind of like the running back conversation. It's like some teams are not going to draft a running back first round. Some teams are just not going to draft a slot receiver first round because they feel like they can find a guy later on. So it's very similar to the running back conversation with a guy that you project as a slot only, a guy that you can put on the tape and see a linebacker track him down. He doesn't have that elite speed. But again, I'm still taking Jackson Smith and Jigba in the first round because he's a really crafty route runner and he's got really good ball skills. Give me those two things and put him in a slot, and he's going to be a high volume receiver. There's no doubt about it. But I do understand where some are coming from when they say, you know what, I can find a slot receiver later on. And maybe not the same type of guy in terms of talent, but still get pretty good production out of him without a first round price tag. So I do understand that thinking to a certain level, but Jackson Smith and Jigba is a really good player. And also another point with these receivers that makes it tough. Quentin Johnston and Jackson Smith and Jigba are. I mean, how do you rank these two guys when they basically play two different
Yeah.
positions? I mean, they're like two totally different guys. So that's another problem with just doing general rankings is one's very different than the other in terms of their role and what they'll be asked to do. And but that's just part of the process and how you try to stack these guys.
Yeah, I wasn't especially high on Amon-Ra St. Brown for similar reasons to Jackson Smith and Jigba,
Hmm.
although I do think JSN is a better prospect. I like that we're in agreement on Josh Downs and Jalen Hyatt, both
Yeah.
big-time deep threats. Hyatt
Hmm.
is super exciting, and it'll be interesting to see. As you've mentioned a lot, all it takes is one team. I wonder if the Chargers, who have said they're looking for a deep threat, would consider any of those guys at the back end of the first round. Rashee Rice is someone that you were especially high on before the year, your top senior receiver, if I recall correctly.
Yep.
He's someone that, you see maybe second round, top 50 or so. Tyler Scott, though, is who I want to ask you about, because this is not someone that's getting pretty much any hype right now, at least in terms of what the general public thinks. Yet here you have him as a receiver ahead of Zay Flowers, who's kind of trending in the opposite direction, as getting a lot of buzz right now. We know about Kayshon Boutte. What do you like about Tyler Scott?
And he's fun. Former high school running back, and he transitioned to receiver at Cincinnati. And this guy can fly. I think going to the combine, the question will be, can he crack a 4.3? Can he get it in the 4.2s? He has that type of speed. I feel like every year we compare somebody to Tyler Lockett, like an undersized speed guy. But I really believe that Tyler Scott has Tyler Lockett like upside. He's so good at creating that vertical push, the stem acceleration, the way he can keep corners off balance with his throttle. So it's not just track speed. It's the ability to throttle that speed and be a dynamic 3-level threat. For a former running back, he catches the ball pretty well. He's a smaller guy, like I said, so there are times where he will struggle to finish through contact at the catch point. That will show up. But if you get the ball in his hands, he can do something after the catch. So I'm a big fan of Scott, and I think he's a junior that came out early. Not playing at Cincinnati, it wasn't a very good offense. So I think people are just haven't watched him yet. But once more eyes get on Tyler Scott, I think they'll kind of come to the same conclusion I did, that this guy's really good and can be a true field stretcher at the NFL. But not only a field stretcher, I do think he can be a 3-level threat. And that's something you mentioned, Zay Flowers. I'm not convinced that Zay Flowers could be a 3-level threat. I think he's really good, but I think he's probably best in space. Use him as slot. Where he could be a really talented player. I just don't see that same 3-level threat with Flowers like I do with a Tyler Scott.
Yeah, let's compare someone who couldn't be less comparable. A.T. Perry from Wake Forest. Is he kind of like maybe Quentin Johnson light for some of these viewers? Understand?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. A guy that's big, he's 6'4", he's really long. The length is pretty impressive. More route running with him. Perry is very good at just being agile footed in his routes. He'll use body fakes, head fakes, comeback routes, really good footwork, that type of thing. So both these guys are really good athletes. Perry might not have the same type of speed. In fact, he doesn't have that same type of speed as Quentin Johnston, but he's a good athlete, especially in zone. He's a very good zone route runner, finds the void, shows the quarterback his numbers, and he's going to make something happen. So I think A.T. Perry's slept on a little bit. The Shrine Game's got two really good receivers with Zay Flowers and A.T. Perry.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch those. I shot Eric Galco a message, super impressed with the just roster construction. I mean, it was pretty good last year, but I think it's exceptional this year.
Eric's great at finding some of those. Like last year, you look at that roster with Jelani Woods and Chig from Maryland, who's done a nice job for the Titans at tight end. I mean, Eric does a nice job, looking under every rock and finding some of those high upside guys that have athleticism and can play football as well.
Let's talk about maybe the most polarizing receiver in this draft class before moving on to the tight ends. Kayshon Boutte from LSU went in as, maybe wide receiver 1, just based on his total profile, athleticism off the charts, run after catch ability, the best in the entire class. Things didn't go to plan this past season for him, and he's your wide receiver 11.
It's just the unpredictable nature with him. You just don't know what you're getting game to game. Based off of ability, he's a top 5 receiver in this class, no doubt. But you just don't know what to expect, and it's really confounding. And it makes it tough to project him. I think a lot of teams are going to look at him and say, and this is what I've heard from teams is, look, he's a slot only, drops way too many balls, and you just don't know which guy's going to show up. And it's hard to draft that guy in the top 50 or 60 picks. I love his run after catch ability. It's really, really good. The body strength, the vision, he accelerates well. The route running's a little inconsistent, a little nonchalant. The focus drops, that's just going to be part of his game. You have to accept it. Scouts are worried about the effort and just being the same guy to show up every day. So now 3 years from now, he could be a Pro Bowler. He could be on his third team. Neither of those outcomes would be surprising to me because he has the talent. It's just a matter of the unpredictable nature of his game, and that really clouds his draft projection.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There are a bunch of good receivers here. We're not going to sit on them forever, but Cedric Tillman deserves some love. Parker Washington. I was high on Dontavian Wicks coming into the year, although I wanted to see a little bit more. But it's a very good receiver class, but it's an especially good tight end class. The tight ends will have to wait for another video. That's it for receivers. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.